Well, thanks for inviting me today to come. It's always fun to go out with a PATH program. I do this probably once a month. I've done it a couple times before, so you're not my first practice run here. I've been practicing sleep. I'm a pulmonary, critical care, internal medicine, and sleep physician. I've been doing sleep now full-time for the last 8 years. I run the Jacksonville Sleep Center, which is a part of Baptist. And sleep has really become my passion. I see folks, about 20 patients a day. And when everybody comes in, I usually ask them the same thing. What are you looking for to get out of this visit? What do you want? And it seems to be a universal theme. People just want to feel better. So I want to feel better and have more energy. So what do you folks want to get out of this today?
Yeah, more energy.
Same thing, feel better, rest more, yeah. So I get a multitude of complaints. Some people feel exhausted and tired during the day. They wake up not refreshed. And other people, even though they're sleeping adequately, and then other folks struggle with getting to sleep. And sleep becomes this huge issue in their life, and they get preoccupied with it, and they can't sleep, and they're always worried about it. So we deal with both of those things. You know, I really have, in counseling people about feeling great, because that's why they come to see me, I've really thought through what I think are the main things that can allow us to feel great and function at our highest capacity that we can. And I've broke it down to these 4 things. And the reason why I talk about this is because it always circles back to, now I'm doing great with my sleep, how come I don't feel great? And unless we're really taking care of all the aspects of our lives, we're not going to feel the best we can. And what I've come up with interacting with these thousands of patients over this last 8 years, is that we really need to do 4 things right in order to feel the best we can. If we're not exercising on a regular basis, you're not going to feel well. If your diet's not, if you're not eating a balanced, good diet, you're going to feel sluggish, you're going to feel tired. If we're not positive about our lives and have a view on what we're doing and a reason to get up in the morning, we feel tired and fatigued, we don't feel well. And then finally, the final component, and my component, is the sleep. If we're not getting an appropriate amount of sleep, we're not recharged, we're not energized, and we're not going to feel as well as we can. So I'd like to talk, so think about those 4 things in your lives, and are you really hitting each one? And we're going to try and see what we can talk about today to optimize your sleep. So to start, I want to talk a little bit about, you tell me I was in your way, you can't see the slide there, a little bit about sleep and what sleep is. And I love this definition: the natural periodic suspension of consciousness during which the powers of the mind and body are restored. That last part, the powers of the body and mind are restored. And we break sleep. I want to talk a little bit about the sleep waves and sleep stages we go through. And that will make sense for you as far as understanding what disrupts sleep and what we can do to make these stages more consistent. So we basically break sleep into 2 different types of, grossly into 2 different types of sleep, either dreaming or REM sleep, and all the rest is non-REM sleep. And REM sleep's about a quarter of our night, and it's REM because it stands for random eye movement. So if you look at your spouse, your significant other, when they're dreaming, you'll see their eyeballs moving back and forth under their eyelids, and that's the REM sleep. And it's interesting. Our muscles are actually paralyzed when we're dreaming, so we don't kick or move. So if you're dreaming you're in a marathon or you're working on a car or whatnot, if that didn't happen, you would actually start to move. And it's funny, patients come in all the time and they say, "Doc, I'm not getting that deep REM sleep." And I'll often joke around and say, "Of course you're not, because REM sleep's not deep sleep. If you think about it, you're dreaming, your mind, your brain is about as active as when you're awake." So it's interesting when we look at actual sleep tracings, the brain waves look the same as awake. We also think there's evidence that we consolidate our memories during our dream phases of sleep. So there's evidence to show if we're not going through all of our regular sleep cycles and stages, that we're not having dreaming, then we're not going to consolidate our memories as well. And I think there's some truth, there's a lot of saying about out goes the bad, in comes the new when we sleep, when we consolidate these memories, and we kind of sort things out. And if you notice, things and problems and issues just seem different when you wake up after a night's rest.
You can move that light around too.
That's a great idea. So all the rest of the sleep, as I mentioned, was non-REM sleep, and that's how we enter sleep. In stage 1, really light, we enter sleep with some awareness in the area. In stage 1, you might be aware of the room somewhat, but you're kind of half asleep and half awake. We spend the largest amount of our time in stage 2 where you don't really have consciousness, but it's not a deep sleep. And then finally, the sleep we really want to feel rested and refreshed is deep sleep or slow wave sleep. And we stage these different types of sleep, or the way we determine them is by our brainwave frequency. And if you look, this is a young man with an electroencephalogram monitoring brain waves and showing the frequency of the brain. And alpha is when we're awake, and beta and theta is shallow sleep, and delta, 3 cycles per second, really slow waves. So that's when you're really in a deep sleep. Your brain is actually slowed down to about the quarter of the speed of when you're awake. And it's interesting, kids do a lot more stage 3 deep sleep than us. And have you ever noticed you can walk in, we were talking about this earlier, and you can take your 5-year-old or your 10-year-old and you can lift up their arm and you can drop it, right? And there's nothing there. They're in that deep stage sleep. So we talked about different stages. So what do we do during the night? Well, we actually cycle through these different stages of sleep. And we do about 4 to 5 different cycles during the night. And if you look at this graph, on this axis right here on the y-axis are the different stages of sleep, 1 through 4, and REM sleep in the green. And this is your night going through. And each one of these is a sleep cycle. And they last around about an hour each or so. So we enter in shallow sleep. We drop down into deeper sleep. We get into our deepest sleep, which should really be green. It shouldn't be red. It's not red, right? That's where you want to be. We do our deep sleep, and then we pop up and we do our first REM session. And we repeat this during the night. And if you look at it, you'll notice that, wow, that's interesting. I'm doing most of my deep sleep early in the night, and I'm doing most of my dreaming first thing in the morning. So if you think about things that you're doing that will compromise your sleep, if you're having 2 or 3 beers right before bed and going to sleep feeling like you've been drinking, well, drinking folks will always say to me, well, if I have a few beers, Doc, I go to sleep great, and sure, they pass out great, but what happens is they skip this deep sleep. They push their dream cycles forward, and they wake up in kind of like this confused dreaming stage early in the morning. Ever notice if you drink a little bit, you're kind of more dreaming, and it's a weird, funny sleep in the morning? And they sacrifice this deep sleep. So they pass out, they're in bed longer, and they wake up not feeling rested because you're not doing all of these cycles and you're missing that deep sleep. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the sleep-wake cycle, because this is real important as far as doing things that will help you get asleep and stay asleep. What drives your ability to sleep at night? And this has been really researched and theorized, and the most current model is that there's 2 real driving forces for your sleep-wake cycle. There's your circadian rhythm, and there's sleep-wake homeostasis. And there's different factors that influence both of these. So first are genetics. There is a genetic predilection for how much you'll sleep. Have you ever heard of the owl and the lark? So the night owl, right? I'm a night owl, I go to bed late. These folks will tend to go to bed at midnight or 1, but they'll sleep a normal amount of time. They want to get up and start their day at 8 or 9. And then you have the lark, they're in bed by 8:30 or 9, and they're up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So there is, we can manipulate that, but there is some genetic determination. Next, probably one of the biggest driving forces is your circadian rhythm. Has everybody heard that term, circadian rhythm? Circadian means around the clock. So we have got a biological rhythm in us that drives our sleep, that turns on and turns off, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But it's very, very, very powerful. And up to 25% of all the cells in your body are driven by circadian rhythm. Your GI tract, there's lots of different factors, your body temperature, your hormonal release, that's all circadian rhythm driven. Sleep-wake homeostasis. So you take your i3 BMW, it's an i3, right, the electric one? In the morning, it comes off the charger, it's fully charged. As you drive it during the day, what happens? Charge comes down. And in us, in our brains, as we are awake during the day, we metabolize ATP for energy throughout our body. In our brain, we build up adenosine, and adenosine tends to make us sleepy. So throughout the process of just getting up, starting our day, and being up, awake all day, we build up these mediators in our body, and we become sleepy as we discharge, just like the battery discharges. And then we take other external factors, food, medications, temperature, stress, social settings, work, and those all impact both of these. So we think it's a combination of all these factors that really allow us to get to sleep or allow us not to, cause us not to get to sleep, that determine our cycle. For the circadian rhythm, probably the biggest determinant is melatonin. Everybody's heard of melatonin, right? And it's a hormone we all produce in the pineal gland in our brain by our hypothalamus. And it's really the main driving hormone. So when you wake up in the morning and bright light hits your eyes, it goes through your second cranial nerve into your brain and actually shuts off all the melatonin production. And you wake up and you alert, and that's the main trigger to start the circadian clock if it's time for wakefulness. In the evening, when it becomes dark out, about 2 hours after bright light exposure, you start producing melatonin, which causes you to feel sleepy and fatigued and will allow you to initiate sleep. And that's produced all the way through the night with its maximum production probably around 2 a.m. So if we combine this together, what happens to get us going to sleep? So you have on the top, this blue line is your increase in homeostatic sleep drive. So you're discharging that battery. So you wake up in the morning, and all during the day, your drive to sleep is increasing. Okay? Bright sunlight hits you in the eye, or at least normal light, you stop producing melatonin, and your circadian rhythm triggers and energizes your body. And that goes through the day. And then in the evening, bright light goes away, your circadian rhythm drive falls off, it's time to sleep. Your battery's maximally discharged. And at that point, hopefully you should be able to just say, oh, I want to lay down, I want to close my eyes. I'm ready to fall asleep. So this is how we think your body and your environment work together and allow you to initiate sleep. And then once you go to sleep, well, what happens? You recharge your battery, and your circadian rhythm resets to start the next day. Sure.
So the TV zone, that screws up the whole cycle, right? Because you have bright lights.
Absolutely, and especially we think the blue light's the worst, and that's one of the biggest problems we have are electronics in the bedroom and telephones and iPads and blue light stimulation.
What do they say? 2 hours before bed, stop TV and phones.
About 2 hours before bed. I think one of the best things for sleep is to stop the bright light. And regular book reading is fantastic because you don't get any bright light stimulation or calming. And if you start reading something, you stop thinking about any work-related stresses, anything else. It takes you away from the rest of the world until you're doing this, and then that's your opportunity. So why is it so important to sleep at night? Well, it is truly a period of rest and rejuvenation. And it's only due to the majority of our tissue repairs. If you're exercising regularly, growth for kids. This is really fascinating. I know that, Jillian, you've got 2 young kids. Fun thing to do with your kids. Do you have their height marked on the wall? In the pantry? In the laundry room? A chart, right. So if you chart your kids' growth throughout the year, you'll find that they grow more in the summer. Over that 2 months, they'll grow more per month than any other time of the year. Why is that? Might be part of it. What do you think?
During the summer, there's more sleep time.
They're sleeping until 10 every day. Kids during the summer, they're sleeping 10, 12 hours every day. And so anyway, they'll grow more. So growth, that's when we do the majority of our growth. And that's why it's so important for anybody that has kids or grandkids that they get adequate sleep. It's when we scavenge free radicals. Lots about free radicals and injury and cancers, right? And all these antioxidant drinks that they want us to drink. That's when we do probably 80% of our free radical scavenging is at night during our sleep. And then finally, there's a lot of hormones that we release. Men release the majority of their testosterone through the evening, and there's several other hormones. So it's absolutely crucial to get the right amount of sleep in order for all this to happen. So the average sleep requirement is about 7.5 hours for an adult. The average American male sleeps about 6.9 hours, and the average 6.9 to 7. And the average woman sleeps 6.5. I have not seen that. It's about the same. Now, there's genetic variation, and we consider it normal for folks to need as little as 6 hours or as much as 10 hours, depending on how they feel. So my wife needs 8.5 hours. She's miserable at 8. Well, she's okay at 8. She's miserable at 7.5. So you got to find that sweet spot for what works for you. I had a colleague that needed, 5.5, 6 hours, and I'd be getting to the hospital and he'd be finished, and a great luxury, but not myself. So interesting other interesting physiologic things that occur when we sleep is your blood pressure actually drops about 10%, and we call this dipping. And when this doesn't happen, it has bad effects on the heart. Heart rate drops about 10%, your breathing falls 10%, your body core temperature drops 0.5 degree. The point of this is it's truly a period of quiescence, rest, relaxation for the system. So what happens when we start compromising getting good sleep? I guess this part of the talk is to get you feeling that this is important. It's important to sleep well. So how about infection rates? Okay, immunosuppression, suppression of the immune system. Increased infection rates, prolonged illness. Our immune system is responsible for surveilling. We all are producing abnormal cells, so they can go on to become cancer, or our natural immune system kills the majority of them. But we all do it every day. The best example of that is with HIV/AIDS. Kaposi sarcoma is a cancer that they get because they're immunosuppressed, but we don't get that, so it's important. So there was a study that came out several years back that I found absolutely fascinating. What they did was they took 2 groups, okay? And what they wanted to look at is, were you more likely to get sick if you were underrested? So one group had to sleep under 5 hours. The other group had to sleep more than 7 or 7.5 hours. And they did that for 2 weeks. And at the end of the 2 weeks, they gave everybody a nasal mist with an attenuated virus, like a flu. Enough to get you sick, but not to kill you, I think was the plan. So everybody got this mist in each nose, and then they looked. So what percentage of the people who were underslept do you think got sick versus what percentage of people that slept normal? And it was fascinating. 30%, 29% of the people that slept 5 hours or less got sick. Only 15% of the people that slept 7.5 or more hours got sick. So it was twice as much in the underslept people. So when you hear about, what do you do when you're sick, sleep and chicken noodle soup and all that, it's absolutely right on that when you're feeling run down like you've got a virus, that you got to make it your goal to try and sleep 8 or 10 hours till you get through that, and it'll speed your recovery. Absolutely speed it. Good to see you again, Robert. They said your customer's up here talking, you got to come up, right? So anyway, I hope that hits home with you all, because I'm a firm believer. You notice you get run down with work, you're working on projects, you tend to get sick, right? So that has been proven. The other thing is sleep is definitely contributes to weight gain if we're not sleeping well. It decreases our metabolic rate, so we're not burning as many calories. It decreases fat metabolism. Our cortisol levels tend to go up, and that inhibits fat-sensitive lipase, which is a hormone required to break down fat, so we don't mobilize it as well. There's 2 really important hormones now we know with diet, and a lot of you have probably heard of it. Ghrelin is the main hunger hormone, drives us to feel hungry. That goes up more underrested, so we feel like we want to eat more. And I wondered why, when I was in med school and I was sleeping 5 or 6 hours, I said, why am I eating all the time? Well, when you're underrested, you make more ghrelin. And then leptin is your satiety hormone, and leptin causes you to feel satisfied when you eat. And that actually goes down. So if you think about it, when you're underslept, you're hungry, so you eat more, and you're less satisfied when you do eat, so you keep eating. And we also release the majority of our growth hormone and testosterone. So the sleep is really important from a metabolic perspective.
So if you oversleep, will you create more leptin, or will you lose more weight, or not really?
There's probably some point where you're sleeping 10, 12, 14 hours a day where you've gone to the other side,
Yeah.
right? I imagine that. So, all right. So how about performance? We're all here. We've got engaging jobs, things to do. Definitely affects concentration and focus. Really important. Learning and forming new memories. They've done studies on this. When you're underslept, you don't form those memories. Kids don't score as well on tests. How about decision making and risk taking? How many times have you been exhausted and tired and you just say, you know what, just do it, right? That's the response. I don't want to think about it, just do it. I'm too tired to deal with this. Safety, they've looked at studies predominantly with sleep apnea, and they found, they did this with driver simulators where you how quick can you get from the gas pedal to the brake pedal when the light changes. And they found that when people sleep under 5 hours, the reaction speed is about equivalent to somebody that's had 2 drinks. So our reaction speed changes. And when I don't sleep enough, my wife tells me I'm cranky and irritable, so that's my evidence for that. But we're not in a good mood. We're not on point. We don't feel good. Everything becomes a struggle. Another study that I found fascinating is regarding postpartum depression. Big issue, right? Everybody knows about postpartum depression. So you say, well, what's the main factor with that? There's, the social life's been restructured for the women. There's all these different factors. Well, they did a study where they, again, took